Thank you, Tom. All right. So, thank you for inviting me here. My name is Rafat Ali. I'm the CEO and founder of SKIFT, and I also represent the No Suits contingent here. So, how many of you know SKIFT? Okay, very few. Well, the rest of you will now know after this. Thank you, Ufi, and thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me to speak here. We are a small company based in New York City. We are the business information company that focuses on the business of travel. So my presentation today, and I'll go through a little bit of SKIFT. My presentation today says the fault lines of disruption, and this, if anything, this is this whole conference is about the biggest disruption happening, which is occupying all of your minds essentially. So, and I'll go through a lot of these. Obviously, what happened over the last week is one part of those larger changes that are happening in the world that affect travel. So that's what I'm going to go first. So I'll go about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll have the panelists come up, and we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. So what does SKIFT do for the people who don't know? We provide media, insights, and marketing to various sectors of the travel industry. The sort of quickest way to think about us is we're the Bloomberg of travel. How do we do it? We decipher and define trends in the travel industry. I like the word trends, and we've latched onto it from the start. When there's fear of big change in the world, the positive manifestation of it is trends. Who helps the industry or the executives in travel navigate those changes? That's sort of our positive filter on the world, which is trends. Who do we do it for? Our focus is very much on marketers, strategists, and technologists in the travel industry. We think that marketing, I think just in the last 5 years, has emerged as the central function for a lot of consumer travel companies. For the first time, you're seeing CMOs becoming CEOs of larger companies. That just shows that marketing has become the central function for a lot of companies, and that's what we bet our company on. So if you read SKIFT, a lot of our coverage on the world of travel is through the lens of marketing. This is all of what we do, skift.com, the daily newsletter. If you haven't seen, it's a free site. You can go and subscribe. We have this thing called SKIFT Trend Reports, which are our research reports on different trends in the industry. We have our big conference that's in New York on September 27, 28, SKIFT Global Forum. We would venture to say the most eclectic creative conference in travel. This year is going to be about 1,000 people. We are bringing SKIFT Global Forum to London next year, to be announced formally. And then SKIFTex, which is our content studio that works with brands in the industry to help portray their messages, deliver their messages to the travel industry. That's our business. This is our audacious tagline. SKIFT is defining the future of travel. If you don't believe it now, you will at some point. This is our office in New York City, our light-filled office. We just also hired a journalist in London to be announced on August 1st. That person is not in this room, but I can't really say their name. And we're also hiring a salesperson in London, so we are coming into UK to cover the UK travel economy, which is going to be very interesting over the next few years to cover that as we grow. And really, this is how we look at the world. So let's start at the top. I heard a bunch of people talk about the need for attracting young people into the industry. I think the exact wrong tactic is to say there's so many jobs in this industry, because no young person sits up and says, oh, this industry has so many jobs, let me go in this industry. What you have to do is to market the industry in right ways and showing this is the most exciting sector in the world, and here's why. Here's where all the larger trends that the young people get excited about converge, and that's why you should enter this industry. That's our view of the world. So when we talk about travel, this is why we talk sort of big picture about the business of travel. It's the most exciting sector in the world because all the early adopter tech trends converge and show up in travel first. If you think about it, travelers are at the forefront of adopting all the technologies, all kinds of new things that happen. That is why it's one of the most exciting sectors. Also, travel intersects with every other sector in the world. So if you are a globally curious young person that wants to work in an industry where 24/7 you dream about travel, guess what? Travel is that industry. So that's how we look at the world of travel. Let's get into the presentation. I just realized I don't have to look back. It's right here. Okay. So the fault lines of, what do we mean by the fault lines of disruption? So these are the big clashes that are happening in the travel industry, and the manifestations of these clashes are what we call the fault lines. So it's old versus new, consumer versus business, east versus west, left versus right. So all these big clashes that are happening in the travel industry that then collide. And what we are here to tell you is not that old is bad and new is good, but that by trying to juxtapose these big clashes, you understand the changes that are happening and the opportunities for people in the travel industry, for people coming into the travel industry, lie at the intersection of these clashes and understanding and capitalizing on these conflicts. What's the answer? The answer is, as these old and new collide, they're completely new industries that are emerging that are a great mix of old versus new. A great new, I would say in the last 2 years, has really emerged. A new sector has emerged, the DIY food kits. I don't know how big London is on this, but New York, it's big. Like for instance, in US, Blue Apron is a big company that's very well funded. That is a completely new category, which is delivering to your house pre-portioned raw material from which you can make food. And that's just one type of that, that's one variation of that industry. There are tons of other companies in that space, so tons of new things happening. This was an industry that did not exist 2 years ago. And essentially it's colliding with people's busy lives that they don't even have time to go out versus the ability to make food. So a bunch of, that's a whole new sector that just emerged. What's the new reality? The new reality is that the new fault lines will emerge as the old fault lines settle. So I heard a bunch of people talking about, well, the biggest part of Brexit is stability. Well, guess what? It won't be stable anytime soon. So the whole point of the travel, and that's what we preach a lot, that people in the travel industry, like sectors of tech, media, and finance, they have to up their metabolism. It's going to be like this forever for the next 10, 15, 20 years. These are some of and how we look at the world, we have this list of actually 33 different fault lines that we look at, and if you look at SKIFT, all of our coverage is around those fault lines. And here just a quick list of 13, and you don't have to read them all, but customer service versus customer experience. If travelers want very personalized experience from companies versus companies who have a certain way of doing customer service, there are tons of stories that we covered that sort of talk about the fault line of what consumers want, the way they want it, versus how companies do customer service. Obviously, a big one that Greg talked about a little bit is this clash between alternative accommodation and lodging and traditional hotel industry. Bunch of these things are converging as well. Greg's business is actually an example of these things converging as well. Car hailing versus car rental, I don't have to tell you that. I think car rental companies have their head hidden in the sand if they're thinking that they don't have competition from Uber and the others of the world. It's absolutely going to destroy their business. I have absolutely no doubt in my head. Package versus unbundled travel, all these other things. The one that I did add in the last 2 days was the rise of neo-isolationism versus the democratization of the world travel. So at the time where the whole world is like suddenly millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people are coming onto the grid, so to speak, in terms of traveling outside their countries. There are countries like US and UK that are closing their borders. So how does that clash happen? So that's going to affect the travel industry in huge ways, as you very well know. So these are some of these big clashes that we look at as we look at the world of travel. That's pretty much it, my presentation. bunch of these fault lines that I've mentioned here. We have 3 representative companies that actually talk about this quite a bit, that have built their business around these fault lines. And I'm going to ask them to come up and come on the stage. So we have about 15 minutes, and the 3 of you, we promised in our emails to each other that we're going to be the most interesting panel at the summit. So we better start fighting. Introduce yourselves quickly, and then we're going to get into questions. James.
Hello, I'm James Osmond. I run TripTease, which is a technology business which helps hotels get more direct bookings by bringing more customer transparency to the booking process.
Hi, I'm Paul Simpson, the CEO of CDP. We don't work in the travel and tourism industry really. We run a global platform on behalf of institutional investors with $100 trillion of assets under management. So they invest in travel and tourism, asking companies to disclose on their environmental performance on climate change, water and deforestation, and what those trends mean for their business. Are you a leader or are you a laggard on environmental performance, and how's that going to affect your investment or your business?
I'm Eric Partaker. I'm the co-CEO of Chilango, a Mexican restaurant chain in London. Before that, I was helping build Skype in its very early days back in 2004, 5, 6. And then with Chilango, I guess the 2 big fault lines that we've participated in is not so much in building the burritos or tacos, but in how we finance the business. So we're the #1 crowd-funded business in the UK, and in terms of funds raised. And more recently, last week, we partnered up with Uber as their key launch partner to launch Uber Eats here in London.
And that was last week.
Yeah.
How's that going?
So well that I only realized Brexit happened this morning. No, I'm just kidding.
People really want to eat up on tacos.
No, it's going very well. Yeah, so it's definitely disruptive.
So, in case you're wondering, there are 3 random companies sitting on stage, and what's the connecting thread between all 3 of them and I guess us as well, as a business as well. One of the things that I thought through and stuck with me was that each of you are looking at your businesses in sort of an alternative way and bringing transparency and accountability in each of your businesses to the market that you're in. So I think that's the connecting thread across all of the companies. James, let's start with you. So you're at a fault line of, sort of one of the biggest industry battles going on today, which is the online booking sites, OTAs versus hotels. Who's winning?
Well, over the last 10 years, the online travel agents have clearly been winning this battle in the sense that they have become the #1 destination for people actually making online bookings. So if you look at their market share, it's grown irrepressibly over a decade, to the point where I think in the UK it's something like 76% of all online bookings for hotels are being made via one of the online travel agents, which obviously represents one of the great revenue or profit shifts in history from one side of an industry to a disruptor. But the exciting thing is I think it's changing now. So we are involved in helping hotels to get better at driving more online bookings. And I think the industry is now beginning to sort of wake up to the fact that this is a shift that cannot be sustained if hotels are going to have enough revenue left in coming through online bookings for them to keep investing back in their own businesses. So they have to stand up and fight now. And make sure that they take control of their own online bookings.
Tons of questions come from there, but we're going to come back to it because we're going to go around the room. So, Paul, you, what marks, grades would you give the hospitality industry?
So I think
because you're not in hospitality, you look at the whole world and sort of index different sectors.
So last year, 5,500 global companies disclosed their environmental performance through CDP. We engaged around 100 in the travel and tourism sector, and half of those disclosed. So, and these are the really big, listed companies. So first of all, disclosure from this sector is not great, but there are some leaders. We do a ranking on climate change and water. Melia Hotels, NH Hotels, the two leading hotel groups. Qantas is the leading airline. Airlines are responsible for 2 or 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions and somewhat the target of the environmental community.
23?
2 to 3.
2 to 3.
2 to 3. But we've got to get to zero. The world's governments agreed in Paris in December. We've got to get to zero sometime early in the second half of the century. So that means that us developed countries need to be at zero really by 2050. So the airlines don't really have a plan to get to zero yet. Qantas has a target to be at half its emissions by 2050. So like all sectors, it's a bit split. There are some leaders. There are a number of companies who are not paying any attention. And what the investors we work with are looking at, how is company management understanding this trend? What's regulation? What's extreme weather event? The Scottish ski industry has always been marginal. It's gone. It's dead. Climate change has killed it. Right? That was marginal. When is the low-lying Alps going to be affected? So it's these kind of things from the regulation really affecting airlines and the big hotels in terms of building regulations, the physical events, and of course the big question for the sector is, do consumers really care? You have on your slide, the desire for sustainable travel. So some of the consumers will vote with their money for green companies, greener hotels. Everyone wants to stay in a nice place. But do enough of us really care, and does that make a difference for the whole sector?
Care versus where they spend the money. I mean, care, if you ask me in a survey, I'm going to say sure.
Sure.
But if my booking behavior or staying behavior or traveling behavior does not mirror it, like time and again, research has shown that consumers don't really buy based on green, don't buy hotels based on green ratings at all.
Oh, absolutely. Most surveys say 80 to 90% of people want more environmentally friendly products and services, but only 10 to 15% are willing to pay for them at this point in time. But how, as you as a company, are going to use this to your advantage? How are you going to, for me, a hotel is a hotel. I can go and stay in 100 hotels. Of course, we know they're not. Where are they located? What type of quality? The hotel industry got the biggest win-win on environment on the towels. You don't want to wash the towels every day. It's expensive. Okay, so get people to feel like they can do something small for the environment by saying you don't have to. That was good. But that's the small step. What's the next steps like that? I think that's absolutely critical. And if you look at the increasing weather, so the best science would say 20% of extreme rainfall is now caused by climate change. We've always had extreme rainfall, we're always going to have it. We have an increasing frequency and severity of it. Look at West Virginia, look at London last week. Can't say any one event is caused by climate change. There's going to be more of this. If your facilities, your hotels are located in somewhere that's going to have a degrading environment because of this, your asset is depreciating. And the investors we work with want to know about that.
So Eric, interestingly, your business, you're sort of writing a few trends. Not by saying environment, be responsible, you're saying clean food. You're saying create your own food because we have deconstructed the Mexican food into different components. It's a very interesting time in the food sector, probably one of the most exciting sectors today in all of business in terms of how things are changing. What are the larger trends you're writing?
Well, it's funny because when you think about disruption and you think about these current trends, you also can't forget the basics. So the number one thing that we pay respect to and kind of design our whole supply chain and recipes against is making sure that the food just tastes absolutely amazing, regardless of where it comes from or how it was made. As much as you would want to believe that people are going to be buying for a myriad of other factors, sometimes it's just really basic stuff like, does it taste great? So a lot of our business is tied to that. But where I've kind of sought to do things, disruptively is not by limiting the attention to just, the food. So for example, when it came to financing the business, there's something great about that transparency with the market, and that's typically something that you don't experience until you IPO or something along those lines.
People who don't know what your campaign was, just give a quick...
Yeah, so we offered to our guests and fans the chance to buy either debt or equity in the company, and we did that
through crowdcube.com.
through crowdcube.com. And we did that through a bond, dubbed the Burrito Bond. And then we did that by offering a 10% stake in the company. And that was taken up by over 2,000 people. So, typically that deal would have been done with a single private equity house or a single banking team. But now I have kind of 2,000 people who own a piece of either debt or equity in Chilango. And that for us is disruptive because that's effectively a sales force of 2,000 like loyalists rather than a single kind of group. So I guess I've just looked at where can we find disruption in functions or other areas of the business that aren't necessarily directly what we do.
How do you build, and you said 11 restaurants now? The first one opened outside London in Manchester.
Yeah, in April, yeah.
In April. In an age where people, or a certain set of very influential people, meaning the younger generation that sort of leads these trends, have general distrust of chain food. How do you build a business that takes that into account?
So again, the basics, going back to that, I'll keep going back to that because if the food does not taste great, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter where the pig came from. So the food must taste great. The other thing is realizing that, you have a 3-year life cycle. So every 3 years, if you're not reinventing.
3-year life cycle.
Yeah, if you're not reinventing yourself, the menu, how the restaurants look and feel, upgrading your communications in some way or shape or form, then you become old in a sea of choice. So we kind of have that kind of innovative thinking or approach and kind of woven into all that we do. So we're constantly, each restaurant is a slightly different expression of the one prior to it, and it's that constant evolution to stay fresh.
James, so the hotel versus the OT, is it a tech battle or brand battle?
It's neither. So I'd say it's a battle for customer relationships, and it's a battle for consumer transparency. So the online travel agents have been very successful in convincing everybody that they are the best place to go and book because they provide price guarantees and they're the cheapest. But
choice. You forgot the word choice.
Choice is great. I totally believe in choice. But the reality is obviously the OTAs would rather that people do go and book via them. But there's some interesting statistics, which are that most people would actually prefer to book direct. And they do that because they feel they're going to get a better experience when they go and stay at a hotel. Most people go to the hotel's website, whether they started with Google or they've come via an OTA or however they got there, but most people go there. Even 50% of OTA bookers go to the hotel website. So there's all this lost opportunity for hotels to actually be driving more conversion on their websites, which historically they've not been very good at dealing with.
So you're saying it's not like people don't even go to the hotel sites, it's that the conversion at the hotel site, mobile, whatever, that's where the big challenge is.
The primary reason is that when somebody goes to a hotel's website, Google studies show this, the number one reason why they then leave and go and book via an OTA is they think it's going to be cheaper. But it isn't. It's going to be the same price more often than not. So I think we're at a really exciting time because hotels are beginning to wake up to this, whether it's through acquisition to give themselves more power and leverage versus the booking agents, or whether it's actually investing in better technology. They're desperately trying to focus on getting direct customer relationships, which I think is really important in the long run because without those direct relationships, it's going to be very hard to provide or unleash the real potential of all the new technologies coming through, whether it's mobile concierge or mobile booking in or smart, using your mobile phone to open for keyless entry. All those things need direct relationships with customers. So hotels have got to grab it.
I could pick up so many threads, but we only have 30 seconds, but I'm going to take 2 more minutes, sorry, because we have questions, one for each. So in an industry that is resource heavy, hospitality, travel takes a lot of environmental resources and general resources. That's one side of the business. The other side of the business is if you want to fund all kinds of initiatives in countries that are very heavily dependent on tourism, there's no other way to finance environmental efforts without having tourism in, and tourism obviously. So how do you balance that dual sort of objective of yes, they take a lot of resources, but they also are a source of revenue.
Well, of course, all of us as humans and all businesses have impact on the environment. That's given by everything we do. And I think that the question is, how can you as a business stand out and say, look, we're doing more positive than we are negative? How do we make sure that us as a business, we've got a positive purpose and we can demonstrate how we're delivering on that? And I think in this sector, there is a real opportunity, and you see it from some, for the ability for differentiation through environment. So how can you use it as a business driver, as an opportunity? We work with lots of companies, Unilever, L'Oreal, Dell, Walmart, on their supply chains. They're making rules now. They will not procure from companies that don't meet certain standards. So if you want to attract them to have a conference in your hotel, you need to meet those standards. So I think if I'm running a company, I was like, how are we having a positive purpose? Of course we have an impact. What is that? We should know what it is. We should be able to manage it well, and we should be able to seize the opportunities from this. And I think that's what we would be looking at. Not it's wrong to have an impact, because we all have an impact. How do we make sure we have a positive impact?
Eric, you said that 3 years is the time. In an age where everybody just moves on to the next new restaurant or the new thing, is that enough?
Well, yeah, you have to make yourself the next new thing, so that they don't want to move to somewhere else, but that they're willing to stay with you. So the partnership that we've just done with Uber Eats is like a fantastic example. So like it or not, the value chain is changing. And I remember when I was at Skype, and there was a lot of people who stood on the sideline and got very upset with their revenues being attacked and profits being attacked, and tried to make it all go away through litigation. And those people were unwilling to embrace the train, so they just got run over. So this is the same thing happening with Uber. That whole delivery, it's just an example. So you can be the ones who don't participate and get upset by the hefty margins that are being charged by these companies, or you can figure out, or you can sit back and say, well, hang on, what's driving this? This is immediate consumption being driven by the group that you're talking about, the youth. They want it now, and if we don't participate, then we'll be left out. And then you have to kind of work back from that and say, well, how do I redesign my value chain, or how do I do things differently so that I can accommodate these new economics and still participate in the market? So it's just being willing to kind of think in those lines.
And everybody talks about like platform. We want to become a platform business, meaning you divorce from your real estate as a brand. Is that something like, obviously Uber Eats, I guess, is one part of that?
Yeah, well, with delivery, obviously there's the, one way of thinking about it is, gosh, I don't want this to happen because all my other brand elements are no longer present. My people aren't delivering the food. I'm no longer in my space. It's just the food. But again, it goes back to the basics. Well, what's the ultimate reason that people are purchasing from you anyway? So it's the food. It's the ultimate reason that somebody is staying in a hotel. It's because they want to have a comfortable stay. So you can't forget those things. And as long as you could still be a steward over that element, that core element, then you should be willing to kind of flex how you do it on a partnership basis. So.
All right. Speaking of food's next. All right. Thank you, everyone. I think we're out of time, right? Yep. Completely out of time? Okay. Thank you. Food's next.